Hi there, this is Phil and David Ogilvy with Muddy Boot Wines. Today we have our first ever truck interview. What we will be doing in our truck interviews is asking only one question, and that question will pertain to growing grapes here in the vineyard, wine and winemaking, and the wine industry in general. Today, our first question is, what are we doing in the vineyard now, here at the end of May, that influences quality in the vineyard? I want to turn it over to David because he knows it all.
Well, I know something. So right now, one of the main things we're doing is we're doing some cluster thinning or cluster dropping, and we're doing that in our Petite Syrah and our Cabernet Sauvignon, mainly to give room for the clusters that we leave, to give room for those clusters to grow. And especially in the case of Petite Syrah, it produces a pretty large cluster. And Petite Syrah is a pretty vigorous vine, especially here in Clarksburg, and can really kind of choke itself out, so to speak, and you'll just end up with a huge wall of fruit. And we don't want that. We don't want a huge wall of fruit. We want to have each cluster hanging freely by itself, and that allows for more airflow.
Yeah.
And we have less problems with rot or mildew popping up. And so if we can keep everything hanging freely, it'll produce higher quality. On top of that, it also allows for more flavors and nutrients to get to those clusters. Instead of having, say, 40 clusters on one vine, we're cutting that down to, say, 20 clusters. And so all the nutrients that photosynthesis and the roots bring to those clusters get spread out into a smaller portion of clusters.
So what you're talking about is your classic quality versus quantity, or
yeah,
generally.
And what we're really striving to do is keep the vine in balance. So in some regions, a vine in balance allows for 3 tons to the acre, and other regions like Clarksburg, we're really at like 6.5 to 7 tons to the acre. So, and then in other regions still, you can grow, farther south, maybe grow 10 tons to the acre. So right now, our sweet spot here in Clarksburg for Petite Syrah is that 6.5 to 7.5 tons to the acre. So another thing when we're going through, I was with the crew this morning. We were talking about what we wanted to do in a certain Cabernet vineyard, and dropping clusters, and in that vineyard it was throwing out about 2 to 3 clusters per shoot, and what we want to do is drop that down to 1 and 2 clusters per shoot. And in certain spots, even at 1 and 2 clusters per shoot, there are still huge clusters, and you can tell it's just going to grow and be a massive kind of ball of fruit there. So instead of dropping all the fruit off, the whole cluster off, we just drop off the wings. So a cluster will have the main body of the cluster, and then it'll have a wing off the side. And so in an area where we've already dropped the clusters we want to drop off, but what's left is still a large cluster, then we'll drop wings off as well.
When a vine's just throwing out all these clusters or even bigger clusters, is that just because the variety does that, even though you prune it so it doesn't have as many clusters, or what, or is it just the fertility in the soil in this Clarksburg area, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of both. We do have fertile soils, varied soils, but fertile soils in the Delta region and in the Clarksburg AVA. And some soils provide more nutrients or create a more vigorous vine than others, but it's also varietal dependent. Petite Syrah is a very vigorous vine, as is Chenin Blanc, so we do a lot to try and tame that vigor. And one of the things we do is besides cluster thinning, is trimming the vine as well, so trimming the shoots. But right now we're going through and we're dropping clusters, and we're hoping that in the future we won't have to drop clusters again. But definitely if the vine is still creating just a huge crop, we will have to go through again later in later months before harvest, after veraison, and cut some more fruit out.
So to wrap it up, it's a quality versus quantity issue ultimately, and as we drop the fruit now, it allows us to, with the fruit that's still there, increase the quality there, and that quality directly transfers into the quality of the wine. To make great wine, you need great fruit. Hey, that's a wrap for our first truck interview. Stay tuned and look for more of these. We look forward to sharing the vineyard with you.